This my integer variable, it was defined within our constructor. So variables has the same name as our class. So this function here is a constructor function, and we can tell because it's got the same name as the class. We can also define variables for a class-wide. So this variable, jumping back a bit, my integer belongs to this function, this constructor function. If we want this my integer variable to be used in other parts of the class, then it wouldn't work. We haven't looked at functions yet in detail, but let's just define another function. So public function, another function. Okay, so we'll talk about functions later. Oops. And we have to give functions a return type. We'll talk about that later. If I want to go trace, so trace my integer plus 10, exactly the same as what we've got in our constructor function. Now let's see what happens. Save everything. Oh, actually, before we go, let's comment this one out. So you can comment out parts code which you don't want to use. It's a lot better to comment out code rather than to delete code, because you may change your mind and you want that code back, or you might be debugging and you're not sure what bit of code is incorrect. So in that cases, you would just comment out lines of code rather than delete them. Always comment out. It's much better than deleting. We have to call this function. Oops. Let's see if I can spell. Another function. So we're going to call this function. So when our constructor runs, rather than, because we've commented out this line, it's not going to run. But we're going to call this function, and it's going to do the same thing. Trace my integer plus 10. However, my integer is not defined within this function. Okay, so let's see what happens. Alright, now we got an error message as expected. So the error message is access of undefined property my integer. The reason we get that error message is because in this function, another function, we haven't defined my integer. My integer was created within this function, our constructor function, not in this function. This function does not know about this variable. Now, if we wanted all our functions in all our classes to know about the my integer variable, what we would do is we would move the line where we set up or declare the my integer variable. We would move that up one level basically, and we put it here. Okay, we might make this one private. Don't worry about private at this stage. Okay, so we'll save it now. File, save all. So we've put our variable declaration, which is this line, up one level. So it's not within the function, it's actually at the class level, if you have a look at these curly braces. Okay, it's fine now, so no problems. 52. Okay, so just to recap what we've done just then, we tried to use the display my integer when it was defined within this variables constructor, and we got an error message because this my integer was not declared within this function. It was declared in this other function, and that caused an error. But when we moved my integer up one level to, this is what we call a global scope. When we moved it up here into global scope, it worked. All our functions know about my integer. So it's important to practice this concept. So when we had this line before, it was defined, the variable was what we call defined locally. Within a function is defined locally. when it's defined up here, we say it's defined globally. So that is an important concept, and you will need to practice it just to make sure you grasp the idea.